Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So, with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan Brito, and I am a coach with Ken Read Counseling. And today I'm going to be reading a letter solo that was submitted by one of our viewers. And for this letter, I'm going to be calling her Poppy, and the individual that she was in a relationship with that she's writing about, I'm going to refer to him as Adam. So I'll do a brief introduction about myself. As I said, my name is Megan. I'm an attachment coach with Ken. I help folks to process the betrayal and a breakup off the back of a relationship they had with somebody that had some pretty significant attachment woundings that affected their relationship. And I can also help folks to work on healing their own insecure attachment styles. And full time, I work as a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. And I provide behavioral addiction counseling to folks in rural southwestern Ontario where I live. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into this letter that was submitted by Poppy. So the letter reads, Dear Ken, I found your Instagram just when I needed it most. Your content is very helpful. I'm having trouble letting go of a failed relationship, a short but intense one. And while I feel like I have a pretty good grip on what happened, I still can't stop ruminating about this person. I'm not sure if my scenario quite fits as an FA boomerang, but I'll let you decide. 3 years ago on a dating app, I connected with someone who I felt I had near instant mental chemistry with, even though they lived a couple hours away. We texted for a couple weeks and then he drove down to see me for dinner, getting a hotel so he didn't drive back late at night. Honestly, I wasn't even sure how physically attracted I was going to be with him based on his profile photos. But mentally, we felt almost instantly on the same wavelength. We're both neurodivergent, me who has ADHD and he is autistic. As a result, forming a mental connection with someone is rare. I decided that it was worth meeting for dinner just to see if the chemistry was there in person. In person, it was even more intense and we spent the night together. It was an amazing sexual connection, lots of intense eye contact, a ton of physical touch, talking, and even laughter. It felt like an incredibly close mental and physical connection on both sides. So I was kind of caught off guard that when I asked about seeing him again, when getting ready to head home, his energy kind of shifted and he basically implied that he wasn't looking for anything serious and we play it by ear. I diverted the conversation and the moment passed and the vibe returned to normal. I was disappointed, but I'm in my 40s and didn't want him to think I was a stage 9 clinger just because we'd slept together. I love that term. I've never heard of that, and I might use that moving forward. Um, but his energy switch was striking just because the reaction was so different from his previous vibe, and we had met up with the intention of exploring dating, not hooking up. I felt a little foolish for thinking he'd felt something more intense, and he drove back home. No real commitment to see each other again, but we kept texting for a week or two, still feeling very mentally on the same on the same wavelength, and we set another date a couple weeks out. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here in this letter just because it's still pretty early on into the letter. I don't have enough information to kind of figure out particular attachment styles, but I do hear perhaps a little bit of avoidancy. Just as you were saying, mentally it felt like a really strong connection, and sexually you said it felt very intense, and I recognize and can appreciate that. When we do have any type of interaction with somebody, whether we're just talking with somebody or there's sexual engagement, sexual intercourse, um, we can feel it can feel very intense for us, but oftentimes we do pick up on if the other person um also has the same level of intensity as we do. And you talked about that. You said, I really felt this from him. It felt really intense, not just for me, but it was coming from him. So I think most of us have a pretty good grasp on that. And that's what I'm hearing in this. And like you said, I know I kind of chuckled referring to yourself as a stage 9 clinger. I can appreciate also feeling that way after a night you had with this man, and as you said, not exploring the intention of dating, but the intensity may not match the reaction of, oh, like not looking for anything serious, or I'm just looking to meet new people, something like that. So his intensity didn't really match how he responded. So again, I can really appreciate, Poppy, why or how you would be feeling this way. So again, also I think I think that if he maybe wasn't looking for anything serious, if Adam wasn't looking for anything more, he probably would have just left it, kind of just left it as thanks, but no thanks. So I know you guys were still communicating, and I think that speaks to, again, the level of intensity, still wanting to connect. So I think that's why I'm sensing a little bit of avoidancy. If he didn't really want anything to do with you, he would have just moved on. So again, now moving on with the letter. So it says, long story short, we never made it to the second date. He texted just a couple days short of he texted just a couple days short of it that he'd met someone else and wanted to pursue that connection. Okay. It stung because I felt the connection so deeply and would have sworn it was reciprocal. However, his message was kind and direct, and after just one date, intense or not, I really feel like I had grounds to feel too ill-used. I thanked him for his honesty and wished him the best. Never texted again. Um, you know, Poppy, I appreciate the maturity in the interaction you had with him. As you said, it stung. And I know if I was in your shoes, I would have felt that way too, because again, the intensity that you felt, and you said it really truly felt reciprocal. And then Adam backing out a few days before the second date would have happened. That makes sense. Again, so even despite age, despite what's going on, it's okay that you do feel the way that you do. I know I feel the same way. And again, the intensity doesn't really match the behaviors. again, that's why I'm sensing some avoidancy. Moving on, continuing with the letter. It says, honestly, I almost wondered if he made up the other woman because he'd never gotten freaked out by the strength of the connection. It felt weird that he went from telling me he wasn't ready for a relationship to suddenly being all in with someone else. I want to agree with that too. You, I know, love or connection can feel intense, but it's not like this light switch. If you're really not looking for anybody, and then you don't usually magically meet the next person and decide to pursue a relationship with them. That's another sign of behavior that can be really avoidant. We meet somebody, or we're saying very adamant, I'm not really looking for a relationship. And then if we meet somebody and it's like a light switch, as opposed to maybe let me go on a couple dates with this person, let me feel things out. And again, just how this letter is written, it says, didn't want to date me, vocalized not looking for a relationship. Next person, bam, relationship. Again, that to me, some red flags for some avoidant behavior coming up. Yeah, so it said, yep, I felt weird that he telling me he wasn't ready for a relationship to suddenly being on somebody else. But ultimately, I confirmed via Facebook that he was dating someone, and it felt like I clearly been delusional and he just not been that interested. Emotionally, I had a very hard time letting him go, or the potential, which has never happened to me before. I just couldn't believe how wrong my intuition was about the connection. However, I never looked him up again or made contact. Life goes on, and I dated multiple people after him, though no one was the same deep connection. And honestly, I thought about him at least every few months. Then in January of 2025, so this is 2.5 years after the first date, we reconnected on an app for neurodivergent people as friends. And it turned out he'd broken up with the woman he decided to pursue instead of me, broken up maybe a month before we reconnected. At some point in the 2.5 years, they moved in together, but she'd moved back home, which was out of state. So I assumed they were truly, quote unquote, done. Uh, he admitted that he joined the neurodivergent app and hoped he would run into me, but wasn't sure how open I'd even be to friendship given how things ended. Okie dokie. Again, I'm just going to do a pause here. This is a little bit interesting. I think a little bit of a spicy turn of events. So Poppy, I just want to go back and echo in the letter that I know you said you felt like you were delusional because your intuition was so wrong, right? Guy met you, had a really, really intense first and only date at the time. Nope, don't want a relationship, don't want anything to do with this. And then you find out he meets another woman, and like a light switch, oh my God, I found somebody. Look, I'm in a new relationship. And again, understandably, at the time, you said you felt like your intuition was wrong. It hurt. You said it stung. And just how intense the connection felt for you from both ends. And again, dropped you like a hot potato, didn't want anything to do with you. It felt like that. I think because the intention, or excuse me, the connection was so intense that can really freak people out that struggle with avoidant tendencies. So that is something that, again, I see as a red flag. And if he really didn't want to reconnect, if he really didn't want anything to do with you, he wouldn't be thinking about you and hoping you would find each other on an app for neurodivergent folks. Like, again, I'm not familiar with this app, but it kind of reminds me of like hoping to find a needle in a haystack. And in this case, it happened. You were the needle in the haystack. He found you on this app. So again, 2.5 years later, and that was after this relationship that ended with the woman that Adam started dating. So again, I think there's some red flags, and he didn't forget about you. So I don't think your intuition was wrong. He was just way too afraid to act on it. All right. So continuing again, moving on. I admitted that it had sucked at the time, since I'd be to sorry. He admitted that when he joined the neurodivergent app, he hoped he would run into me, but wasn't sure how open I'd be to even friendship given how things ended. I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit stumbling with this letter reading it tonight, folks. I do apologize. Um, I admitted that it had sucked at the time, since our connection felt pretty intense, but I'd never been mad or felt he'd been disrespectful in how he handled it. Rejection is part of dating. I'm not a bitter or jealous person, and I was open to re-exploring our connection. We agreed to get to know each other again and see how things went. I knew it was probably too soon for him to date again, but hormones are not particularly smart, and after about 3 weeks of texting, he visited again. Still had amazing chemistry, had a great long weekend together. 1 week later, did it again and had another great long weekend. We didn't set another date because he did confess his anxiety was building. He has always been extremely honest about his anxiety, autism, history of alcoholism, sober for 9 years at this point, and just general emotional dysregulation. I told him we could wait until he was ready, even if it was weeks or months out, because I was in no particular hurry or rush hurry to rush our relationship since he'd gone through a recent breakup. I have plenty of my own family issues, a sick mom, a bipolar sister, and a stressful career. While I love texting every day, I didn't actually feel like I had to see him constantly and was fine to wait until his anxiety had subdued. In the 6 weeks we dated, he mentions the ex from time to time and the reasons for splitting, basically saying he felt he'd given it his all, but they were just too different in the ways they connected emotionally. We didn't talk about her a ton, but he was never mean or derogatory about her and seemed to own that he was as responsible as she was for the relationship ending. Like me, he's been in a lot of therapy, me for anxiety and ADHD, and him for his autism and his addiction. I never got the feeling he was missing her exactly, but did mourn the relationship. I knew they had a deep bond, and that just doesn't die overnight, but never really felt threatened by her. That said, it was still awkward to talk about her, so for the most part, we didn't, which I regret, because by week 6, I can feel him pulling back slightly. We text daily and frequently, and I knew we shouldn't, but of course, that level of attraction can be addicting. Okay, so feel like I went through a good chunk of the letter. So I think with what I read, again, I'm not going to be surprised if this chunk of the letter talking about the exes, then maybe this woman's going to make a reappearance later on in the letter. But something I'm curious that really is standing out to me in this portion of the letter is how Adam is talking about his anxiety. And he said, I struggle with it. I have autism, active in my sobriety. That takes a lot of work. And that is a decision somebody has to really make every day when they wake up. So I hear that there is a really heavy mental load he has to carry every day. Um, but again, I often, we often hear, and this is something we see too, the anxiety that folks that can have really avoidant attachment woundings, how that carries. I love the comparison that Ken makes. I use it as well. He says it's like a hurricane. Maybe on the outside, they look fairly cool, calm, and collected, or maybe slightly anxious, but inside, it is literally like a hurricane just moving through their body of emotions. The anxiety is at a 20 out of 10 on the Richter scale. If this was, that's an earthquake, but it's so intense. And the reason for that often is because when we are avoidant, we are detached from our emotions. We have very limited thoughts and insight into our behaviors, into how we affect other people. And because emotions are cut off, they're stunted, we don't really know how to connect with them or how they're working in our body. Or if we feel something like anxiety, even if we don't have an anxiety disorder, if we can't connect with that feeling, we don't know how to regulate it. We don't know how to name it, how to just allow it to be there without judgment and accept it. You know, understand why it's coming up for us. What do I need to do with this? So it's this constant hurricane just moving through their body. And it's way more intense than we realize if we don't struggle with avoidant attachment woundings. So I'm not going to be surprised, again, continuing to read this letter from Poppy, if in it the anxiety continues to build, and then the pulling away because the connection is so intense that is going to affect the reconnection, the relationship. Or again, I know, Poppy, you said you don't feel threatened by the ex-girlfriend, but kind of awkward talking about it. I can appreciate that. But again, is she going to make a reappearance? We shall see. We'll continue to carry on, because that's not going to surprise me either. All right. So it says, I had a lot going on with my mom being sick and had shared that and other stressors in my life. It was nice to have someone I could just spill those emotions to and not feel judged or like they had to solve them for me. I could vent safely to him. I was worried I was leaning too much on him and offered to pull back. He reassured me that it was fine and he wanted to know what was going on in my life, not just the superficial stuff. Okay, so I hear Adam is curious, wants to know your emotional state. What are stressors and concerns for you? And at the beginning of the letter, you asked, does Adam possibly have a fearful avoidant attachment style? Was this a boomerang from someone who has a fearful avoidant attachment style? So we often see folks with that attachment style are okay talking about emotions. They're more okay talking about their inner world emotion wise. Will maybe still struggle to connect with it, but they're okay talking about it, and they're okay hearing about that from another person. But they can maybe talk a little bit about it, but if they have to do something with it, hold space for another person, acknowledge how they're feeling, and again, process or do something with that emotion or intimacy and deep connection, that's where they freak out. Folks that have just more of a dismissive avoidant attachment style, we don't really see that often. They don't want to talk about their emotions. They don't really know what's going on. They don't see the importance or relevance of them. It's just like it's not a part of conversation, or with even in their like no thoughts, not in their headspace. So so that possibly maybe fearful avoidant attachment style. So again, for now, that's just my thoughts, but we'll see. We'll see if anything changes as we continue to move through this. So it says, then one day I approached a sensitive topic with his relationship with his kids. And it was a good conversation, though not super deep, but I knew a painful topic for him. Then he basically ghosted for about 5 hours afterwards. The minute he did it, I swear I knew it was coming, before telling me how he wasn't as ready as he thought to date again. Implied he wasn't feeling our relationship as much any longer, and he didn't want to string me on. And so we needed to stop dating. Ooh, yeah. As you said, you saw it coming and overwhelmed, talking about a painful subject. And instead of from Adam, acknowledging this is painful for me to talk about, or even saying I don't want to talk about it. And you said it was fairly superficial. You didn't go deep with it. And he just shut down and like 5 hours, just stepped away and then said, "Oop, sorry, I can't do this." Red flags, waving red flags of somebody that has a pretty significant dismissive attachment woundings, whether they're or avoidant attachment woundings, whether they're dismissive or dismissive, leaning, fearful, avoidant. So that conversation and how he responded red flags of some severe attachment woundings. Like last time, I just thanked him for his honesty and wished him the best. And I told him I wouldn't contact him again, but he was welcome to text me if he ever wanted to talk. I'm 45 years old. I'm not begging a man to date me, and I'm not chasing him down. However, it still hurt my feelings and my pride. I also felt fairly blindsided and embarrassed that I trusted the connection was sincere, just to be dumped again with almost no warning. I oscillated between thinking he'd run because the connection scared him or because the ex was back. Within 2 weeks, it was confirmed it was option number 2 when I realized I was blocked on everything and they were back to Facebook official. What a slap in the face. Oh my God, Poppy. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Yep. Okay. Blindsided. 1. Yes. As I was reading the letter and I thought to myself, oh, is the ex-girlfriend going to make a reappearance? Are we going to have a sequel? Yes, she is back. And it was just a conversation about the relationship he's having with his kids. You said it was fairly superficial. Yes, maybe it was painful, but him shutting down, backing away for 5 hours and saying, sorry, I can't do this. And then again, what was it, 2 weeks later? Yeah, within 2 weeks, his girlfriend was back in the picture. That again, red flags being waved, lights are flashing. There is somebody directing traffic in like an orange vest, all pointing to a sign that says avoidant. This person has severe avoidant attachment woundings. Just look, it's right over here. Here's Adam. Oh my God. And just Poppy, you were just blindsided, and it's not okay. None of this was okay. And you know, you're 45 years old. I don't care how old you are. I don't care if you're 45. I don't care if you're 25. I don't care if you're 95. Being blindsided and having to be at the mercy of somebody's childish behavior that they can work on is unacceptable, and you did not do anything to deserve it. That's not okay. I'd be furious. I'd be beside myself. So that level of distress and embarrassment you were feeling and just feeling blindsided and used, you know, these are the reasons why you feel that way. So not okay. So we're coming to the end of the letter. And again, just me sitting here shaking my head. So clearly, while I was sharing my life and believed he was interested, he reconnected with his ex. Yeah, he did. I don't know how long it was going on, but I'd assume at least a week or two based on how quickly he blocked me and they were officially back together. I don't know if he delayed telling me because my mom was in the hospital or if he was just holding off until she was a lock again. I just know I felt so ashamed that I believed this man felt something for me twice, and both times I'm left feeling like a fool. And yet, nearly 4 months later, I still miss him. I am dating again, though nothing serious. I desperately miss feeling like I could talk to him about anything and truly be myself with him. I don't understand why I feel so safe to be myself with someone who has now dropped me like a hot potato twice. He obviously is not healed, still in love with the ex, and was no doubt just using me to feel good about himself and to make her jealous. I feel such a loss of trust in my own judgment as well that I didn't see this coming. Him running didn't surprise me because of his avoidance, but back to the ex caught me very off guard. Okay, I'm just going to put a pause here. Again, there's just a little bit left of this letter. I really, really, really want to emphasize this, and I would not be saying this if it wasn't true. his actions, disgusting, unacceptable, inexcusable. This is a grown man who, especially in this day and age of social media, how we talk about mental health, how we talk about trauma, has literally the most access to him to get counseling, therapy, if he wants to do coaching, whatever it is, he has access to it. There is no questioning that this is not accessible to get help, because that's what he needs. And he needs help with really, really severe attachment woundings, where he runs when he feels uncomfortable, when he feels discomfort, when he feels intensity. And anytime this surfaces from you, it triggers him, because there was a connection there. There was a genuine connection there. That's why he ran. That's why he probably went back to the ex-girlfriend. And I want to make it clear, in no way do I think that he was using you as a fill-in until the girlfriend came back. I think that he went back to her probably because there isn't that much intensity. Maybe she doesn't talk about the kids. Maybe they pop up, and maybe probably they didn't have that intense connection and chemistry like Adam did with you, Poppy. So going back to somebody that feels safe, that doesn't rub his attachment woundings, that doesn't activate things, that he can probably do whatever he wants, feels safer for him. He doesn't have to be accountable for his behaviors. They don't have to get deep. So going back to the ex-girlfriend probably feels safer than being with you, because there is a strong connection and you want to get to know him. You want to talk about things. If that wasn't there, he wouldn't have boomeranged back after that intense first date you had 2.5 years, 3 years earlier. So I know you feel used. I know you feel like you were the fill-in, but you weren't. You were not the fill-in. If you were, I would be saying that. I would be saying, yep, this is the case. Really wasn't attachment woundings. Sucks, cry about it, lick your wounds and move on. No. He a vulnerable, like that vulnerability and connection, that was too intense with you, not because he didn't care about you or didn't want to have you in his life. So, last bit here. I keep trying to identify why I still want him. He was clearly less than honest with me. I couldn't trust him to not do this in the future, and obviously his feelings for me were not deep or sincere. Maybe I just cling to some hope that something was there so I feel less stupid. My logical brain knows this man isn't that great, and the man I'm currently dating very casually is younger, fitter, and cuter. Yet I'd still drop him for a second for the avoidance, so clearly I'm not healed enough to date anyone seriously, which this new dude is aware of. I know some of this is pride and ego, but I feel like I can't trust my own judgment any longer. How could I have been so fooled to make such a fool of myself? I don't connect easily or deeply, so I'm aware that's a component in this emotional cocktail. I don't know what I want from you or this letter, maybe validation that he wasn't using me the whole time. But even if he wasn't, why do I still care? I struggle with anger that he didn't just tell me the minute she contacted him, because I'd have backed off immediately to let him sort that out. Instead, I feel like he led me on until he was sure of her again. Any advice on letting this connection go so I can be strong enough to say no should he come around again? I'm sadly half hoping he does, even knowing damn well it will end the same way again if he doesn't take a longer break from dating and work more with his therapist. Or maybe the connection is just on my side, so there is nothing for him to fix. Thank you for making your viewers feel so seen, Poppy. Ah, Poppy, it really was a pleasure to read this letter. Thank you for writing this and giving me the privilege and the enjoyment of doing so. So just to really sum up and in as small of a nutshell as I can fit this into, truly, Adam wasn't using you as a fill-in. I think Adam is using his ex-girlfriend as the fill-in because she probably isn't so intense. Yes, you had the one date and then he came back, but you talked about how intense this experience was for both of you. And when it felt too intense, he would go back to somebody who he felt safe with, which is this ex-girlfriend. Again, as I stated earlier, someone who he probably doesn't have to talk about the painful relationship he has with his children. Somebody he doesn't have to talk about vulnerability with. Someone who probably doesn't have that really strong intellectual, emotional, sexual chemistry with. This is somebody who is safe, and safety will always out trump the desire for meaningful connection. If that doesn't feel safe, we're going to go to what does feel safe. So really, and again, I wouldn't be saying this if it wasn't true. You mattered a lot to him. You mattered a lot to him. You probably still do. And just because he couldn't make it work with you doesn't mean he didn't care about you, doesn't mean he didn't love you. You were more than he could handle, and not because of anything wrong with you or anything you did, but because of his own challenges. Yes, he is recovered from alcohol addiction, which is amazing. That is a lot of hard work. I see that every day with people that I work with at my full-time job. And oftentimes people will struggle with addiction to avoid connection. That feels too unsafe for them. They feel like who they are isn't enough or isn't worthy enough, isn't acceptable. So even though he's not drinking, I wouldn't be surprised, again, if he feels like he is not worthy enough for deep, genuine connection. And that's why this ex-girlfriend he goes back to. And again, I know you don't know this one from a hole in the wall, it sounds like, but I'm going to bet money she doesn't have what you offer. And you offer a lot of really, really wonderful qualities, just as so many of our viewers do, right? Who submit these letters, who are wonderful people, who deserve nothing but the best relationships, and the people that they date that make them feel otherwise, you know, they don't deserve people, they don't deserve people like you. So yeah, it's not you, Kelly. You weren't the fill-in. And then you're talking about, how can I process this? Why do I care so much? You cared because you had a connection to Adam. You cared, and it's so upsetting for you, and you still want to see him because there was that connection that wasn't mutually, dissolved. It wasn't mutually agreed upon and really worked through, that, hey, this relationship we're in isn't working for X, Y, and Z reasons. We tried to make this work. So, gotta love you and leave you. I wish you all the best. That never happened. You had a really strong connection. You had one conversation that was really intense. And instead of Adam saying, hey, I can't do this, or this is uncomfortable for me to talk about, he just pulled away, didn't give any explanation, said, I can't do this, blocked you. 2 weeks later, the ex-girlfriend, who is very safe and probably very, again, bland and surface level, and will not hold him accountable for anything, came back into the picture, and he can live a carefree life. So you are struggling with grieving, genuine grief of a relationship that you didn't get to decide ended. This literally is traumatic. and I'm not using that word lightly. So to really process it is to just accept without judging that how you are feeling is there for a reason. You are feeling what you're feeling because you don't get to have that voice to try or to make things work. That was taken from you by Adam. That's not okay. It doesn't matter how old you are. These types of dynamics affect us all. And when I talk about, the pain and missing somebody or grieving something, we cannot logic our way out of pain. We cannot logic our way out of grief. We have to feel it. We have to feel that pain, allow it to be there, cry through it, scream through it, just sit in the ugly, messy parts of feeling that. You have to do that to heal. That's why counselors and therapists say, in order to heal, you have to feel. I know it sounds super cheesy, but that's what happens. Your emotions are not logical. They live in our body. We have to heal that and allow that to be there to feel better. So just acknowledge how much you're hurting. You don't have to logic it. You don't have to judge it. Just say it's there. And if you want to cry, cry. If you need to scream, scream. And also know and keep reminding yourself that this guy did you dirty. He screwed you over. He behaved in ways that were unacceptable. And he really did blindside you. That really is traumatic. We're not going to forget that overnight. I hope that is helpful, Poppy. And again, it really was a pleasure getting to read this letter. Thank you for submitting it. Thank you to folks who listen. And I hope that this is going to help you process and know that Adam did love you. You meant so much to him, and hopefully you can find some peace. If you or anybody else is looking for some support, I do have Space for Clarity calls and coaching. I do work with Ken only part-time. I only see him Mondays and Tuesdays. I do live about 2 hours away from Toronto, so I'm at Eastern Standard Time. I do see folks from all over the world. So essentially, if you can, your time can work with me, I'll be more than happy to work with you. All right. So wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a good day, and I'll see everybody soon.